think one of the trends that happened during the past, 2 decades, dealing with the Asian and Pacific Island population is, whereas before, 20 years ago, you have more specific prisoners, such as some Chinese, some Vietnamese, and then you have the Pacific Islanders. But then, after, around the mid-80s and 90s, they start having a lot of Southeast Asians coming through because of the refugee situation in Southeast Asia, because the United States government's policy over there, utilizing their country as battlegrounds. So a lot of people coming, the Vietnamese coming after 1975, and you have all the Cambodians, Laotians, and all these people from their home countries, being bombed out of their country to come to the United States, and they cannot adjust to the culture, and because they are being placed in in different ghettos, just like the rest of the people who's been in the United States. So what you see is a lot of crime happening, plaguing their neighborhoods, and then they start populating the prison. And but one of the things dealing with the population change with the Asian and Pacific Islander population is the fact that the Asian culture does not promote raising awareness. It's all about keep all the negative stuff, hush hush, and just talk about all the positive stuff. Right? That goes back to the model minority myth that we've been all experiencing in the Asian and Pacific Islander communities, specifically with the Asians. Right? But so what's happening right now is you have a lot of Southeast Asians, a lot of Asians, filling up the prison system. But then we don't get enough support and culture competency to help these prisoners. So when they come back out into the community, which community they never left, even though they're incarcerated, that does not mean they have left the community. Right? They're still part of the community. So how can the community support these guys come out so they don't recidivate? So most of the times that when an Asian and Pacific Islander prisoner, when they commit a crime, most of the time they commit in their own community. So their own community does not help them or to understand what kind of struggle they have faced and why they're in prison, to really understand the root causes of incarceration. Then what they're going to have is a ticking time bomb where people are going to come back out of the community and continue to terrorize the community. While in the meantime, they continue to be victimized twice, not only by themselves, but by the government and by the community. So therefore, the changes between the past 2 decades has been significant dealing with the Asian and Pacific Islander population.
Well, I noticed not just the API, but also other ethnicity. Majority of prisoners today are, they end up in prison because of drugs. To where 20 years ago, it was, more like, gang-related crime or, robbery, something like that. But, almost like 90% of API that I know that I met inside, they're doing time because of drug-related case, and not just youngsters. A lot of older, middle-aged API.
I think some of the challenges are definitely the language barrier. So you have a lot of Asian Pacific, islanders in there. They have they are new. They could be immigrants, or they could be in this country for a little bit, but they don't understand the language. So when they go into the prison, they also don't get the resources because they don't understand. So they are more susceptible to be targeted, by the prisoners and by the prison guards, because they don't provide specific translator for these prisoners. And the other challenge is the mental health issue. You have a lot of people who have to have mental health issues out on the streets, and when they get into the system, then when the mental health system is a totally a joke, where they don't get to any type of services, then they don't get the necessary help. I give you an example, and also the example also includes how understand a little bit of law can help an individual inside of the prison system, and that is, well, I was in a solitary confinement at one time, and my next door neighbor does not speak any English, and he has mental health issues. He's seeing different images. He's always talking to somebody. It's this invisible, being. And when he goes to what they call a committee to determine where they're going to house this individual and what kind of medication this individual should take, Well, he does not understand any of that. So basically, he's doing whatever they just decide they want to do to him and taking whatever medications they give it to him. So when I asked him what kind of medication you're taking, he said, I don't know. So I asked him specifically to let him know that he has rights, even within the confines of this walls. And I asked him to exercise the rights by first asking the interpreter, trying to understand what is he doing, what are they doing with his life. Right? When he asked for an interpreter, they refused to give him an interpreter. They said, we don't have a Chinese interpreter speak Cantonese. So, well, too bad. So after I found out about that, so what I did was I wrote to one of my attorneys. I asked him to write a letter to the warden, to the director of the medical services, and the next day, as soon as they receive the letter, they provide him with a translator. So it's up to the people who put pressure on them in order for them to get the service they deserve. Even as a prisoner, because regardless of who you are, you're still a human being first. So the mental health challenges, the language barriers, and the fact that you have, because the overpopulation of the prisons, the Asian and Pacific Islander, they are susceptible for people to, even inside the prison, they have more like a model minority myth even inside the prison system. Because whenever there's a riot jumping off or whenever something violence happening, mostly you get the African Americans on lockdown, or you have the whites on lockdown, you have the Latinos on lockdown. So many of the times the Asian and Pacific Islanders don't get on lockdown. So they end up, the people who are not on lockdown, they end up working in the kitchen to provide the meals for the people who are locked down. So they being used in that way, in a sense, because they've been so-called behaved, right? So they're allowed outside of their room. So those are just some of the challenges that we face inside.
I think Ed touched on that about the language barrier, and a lot of it majority of the people that's affected in API is the Vietnamese and Laotian. They migrated here in '85. Their parents can't speak English. They're not able to get the proper resource or proper representation. That's why you have, increase in the population of these certain groups, because they can't get no resources, and the system is just there to put you away. And plus you have this code on the street, you can't talk, you can't speak, you can't snitch on nobody, so the truth never really come out in those systems, in the courts, into where only one guy would go into prison for what happened, rather than the whole crew, like 7 or 8 people for one crime. And so they're not really getting these right representation. They make a deal. They're appointed a public defender that don't really care, because they only have so much. They only get paid so much. So it's really unfair to these people. And as they learn to speak, as they go to school, and now you're seeing these people appealing, but they spent like 10, 20 years in prison already. And I know a lot of Vietnamese that's, the court make decisions, and they ended up having to go through the feds. They go through the process, go to the state first and the feds, and now a lot of them are getting out because of the way they were railroaded in the court system. So you see this, and you hit it right there. There's it's a language barrier and no representation. They just go and do what they need to do in there, and just ship them to prison. And then they wonder that some of the inmates there that are Vietnamese, Laotian, Cambodians, they don't even know how much time they're getting. They don't really realize the time they're getting. I had met three individuals that has over 100 years, and now some of them have gotten out within the couple of years, appealing their case and letting the truth be known and what they were going through. So